Well, the project is a multimedia electronic cookbook. Took us about 2.5 years to put it together, but essentially we were really frustrated with the idea of a traditional ebook, which are simply words on a page that you press a Kindle button and goes to the next page. And I was doing a dinner for about 150 people here in Kalamazoo. A writer came to interview me, and he had an idea that was already something he had started to develop, which was the idea of an interactive electronic book. And he was there for this dinner. He was impressed and really interested and intrigued by the idea of 16th century Turkish food, and came to me afterwards and asked me if I would be interested in putting the two things together, taking this ancient historical cuisine and applying it to the idea of a cookbook, but in an electronic form. I was in the process of learning about European medical background of food, which is extremely important. So in order to understand that, you need to go back to the doctors and the writers, medical writers at the time, which were Arabs. The greatest doctors in the world were from the Arab world. And I started to study Ibn Sina and Ibn Razi's, and then came across some manuscripts that were cooking manuscripts from the Arabic world, Persian world. And one of them that I had used for quite some time, I fell in love with the cuisine. I started recreating the cuisine. I became known for working in the food of 14th, 15th, 16th century Persia, and a couple approached me about doing this dinner. They knew I had been working in the genre, and it turned out that this one particular manuscript that I had studied heavily became the first cookbook of the Turks. And it was prized by them. It was kept in their palace. It was copied over and over. And one of these copies in the mid-1400s turned out to have some hidden recipes in it that no one knew about. And a man named Stefan Yerasimos, who is a famous Turkish Ottoman scholar, discovered these recipes, and he brought them to light in the 20th century. So those are the foundation of many of the recipes in the cookbook.
So if I were to ask you, what are the three primary flavors of the food during that time, what would you say they are?
Well, there are probably 5 real basic things, but mutton or lamb, number 1. Number 2 would be grain, and number 3 would be sugar. And those combinations permeate almost every dish in one way or another. You'll see because of the nomadic roots of the Turkish people, the strong influence of the grain, the life of living on the steppes, eating yogurt, and then raising sheep. Cattle were not used. Sheep were the primary source of food. That influence is very strong in this cuisine from the 16th century, 15th, 16th century. And from there you have the influence of the worlds that the Ottomans dominated, which were the Persians, the Arabs. You have influence of the Maghreb. And then you also have the Byzantine influence. So there's much more that comes into play when it comes to the cuisine that was served at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. But you primarily have this foundation in the grain and the meat and the sugar. Mastic is a gum resin that's used in a lot of dishes from the Middle East and India, and I have found that it adds a depth of flavor that you can't duplicate with anything else. It kind of pulls everything together and creates this body that doesn't exist otherwise. I have always had a really eclectic style of cooking, but now I incorporate some spice combinations that probably aren't common to other people. I have a spice mix that includes things like lavender and rosebuds, and so you have flowers and spices with, you have cardamom and cinnamon all in the same mix. So my spice applications are very different probably than they ever were before.